Toad for DB2 on zOS is a very robust object compare feature. It can be used to compare schema-based objects such as tables and indexes, as well as database objects such as databases, storage groups, table spaces, etc. And it can be used to compare objects within the same subsystem or across subsystems. I'm going to select a group of tables, right click and say compare object. And this is going to bring up the compare object document and allow me to specify my target subsystem. For this example, I'm going to keep it the same, but I could have chosen a different subsystem than the source. And I'm going to click next. And what Toad is doing, I selected a group of tables. Toad defines tables by obviously the table definition, but if there's any constraints on those tables and any indexes on those tables, those will come in automatically. As you can see, by expanding the list here, we've brought in several indexes and constraints. Now, Toad also allows you to drag and drop objects into this compare control. So I'm just going to bring in a couple additional objects. So I'm going to bring in a basketball players table. And again, each time you drag an object in, Toad's going to see if there's any other automatic dependent objects that it needs to bring in, such as check constraints, indexes, etc. And I'm going to bring on in the basketball teams table as well. And you can see that I originally started just with the set of football tables. Now I'm going to have football tables and basketball tables in the mix here. So you can see as I expand these things, you'll see my basketball, football, etc. Now we have some options on the bottom here that can be used to like bring in referenced objects. So since I started with tables, if I click this, it's going to bring in those tables, table spaces if I want. And if there's any additional dependents, such as views, for example, of those tables that references those tables, if I click this, it would bring those in. And we have various other options down here. We have advanced options as well. If I click this button to bring up the advanced options, you'll see we have options to ignore certain attributes. So for example, you might be using compression one way in your production environment and a different way in your staging and test environment. So we give the ability to ignore those attributes, as well as like data capture. There's many many attributes that can be ignored. And in the zOS specific section, we have additional things like ignoring OBID, audit differences, etc. I'm just leave those as the default and click next. And this screen is the mapping screen where you could define your transformation. So for example, if you have different naming conventions in your production environment than your test environment, you can map those very easily just by selecting values in your target environment. So if we actually go out and fetch these values from your target, so you could very easily map those. Once you've done the mappings, you could save those, and I've done that. So I'm going to load a saved mapping file that I created previously. And you can see in this mapping file, I've mapped my source stage schema to a prod schema on my target. Same with my table space. On my source, it was called FB, and my target is called FBP. Same with my database name. We have several different ways you can map, like a simple different way. So if there's a table on the source called football agents, that table's name will be called or referenced to a football agents pro table on the target. We also have a regular expression mapping where anywhere in a table name, if we find the phrase division, the string division, we're going to change that to conference. And we also have wildcard mapping where you could actually use a percent sign where anything following basketball could be found and then substituted in using this $1 value. And we'll get to that in a little bit as we see the mapping. So I'm going to click next here. And what Toad is doing now is going out, grabbing information about the source objects, fetching information about the target objects, and then applying a comparison to identify the differences. And on this review comparison report panel, you could actually see the differences. And from here, if you click on an object in the top control, that object will get highlighted on the bottom control. And these results here, if these green arrows pointing to the right mean they're source only, those objects do not exist on the target. These arrows pointing both ways, a red and a green, signify that the objects exist both on the source and the target, and we will actually do a synchronization of those changes. So for example, this table here has some differences and they're highlighted on the bottom here. This table here has some differences and they're highlighted on the bottom. This table here has some differences. And you could use these buttons on the top here to filter out the above list. So for example, if I only wanted to see the objects with differences, I just only enable this button. And then you could view those changes. And we have a button here, it's called Unmap Source. You can see that we've actually mapped everything that we needed to here based on your mappings in the previous panel. But if you wanted to see the native source, as it is on a source today, without any name mappings taking effect, you could click that button and we'll give you the native. So you can see that the schema is actually staged. Uh, some things are a little bit different. The table space and the database name are a little have been mapped. But if you click this button off now, uh, this shows you exactly what has changed after the mapping has occurred. And we believe this is the view that people are going to want to see, but they could always click this button and see the unmapped source as well. Another thing that we have in this is the ability to uh, view details in the top grid about your changes. So if I click this button right here, it's going to actually allow us to only be on the top grid and view the changes in a more textual, informational type of way. So you can see this object has got data capture changes. It also has an additional column. This object has got some changes to a column. You can see that the column data type has changed here. So you could use only the top control to view that information. So for example, if you had many tables that had very large amounts of columns in it, you might be forced to scroll down in the bottom control to see the changes, where the top, using this details up on top now, in the top control, you'll be able to see those changes just by viewing the top control. You could also print a comparison report off by clicking this button right here, and this is going to generate a PDF report of the differences. So for example, if you might have a DBA that requires you to present these changes to him, and you could actually use this report to show him the things that are going to change before, in fact, you make the changes. So it's a very handy, very complete report showing a lot of information about the changes, including the detailed, just textual type of changes without having to actually look at the changes and the differences in the DDL. It's a very handy, very easy way to generate a comparison report. And once you're satisfied, all the objects that have check marks in them will be synchronized. So you just click the Send to Editor button, and that's going to generate the sync script, which is going to make the target look like the source. And I'm actually going to bring up the script map. Again, this is in the SQL editor. It's like an interactive table of contents, allowing me to jump to the statements in the sync script. And you can see that, what we've done is, when we have to, we will drop and recreate tables. When we can get away with just native alters. So for example, I know that we had to add several columns to the teams table here. Um, they're a little bit different, so we could get away with just by doing native alters. We'll do those to synchronize the tables if we can. But if we have to, we will be forced to drop and recreate tables to make sure that the target tables and the target objects are like the source. So that is the object compare feature for DB2 zOS.